The woman in the red dress was never meant to be auctioned, but desperate circumstances had brought Olivia Caldwell to the crude wooden platform in the dusty main street of Columbia, Missouri, on that sweltering July afternoon in 1876. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the auctioneer's voice rang out across the crowd of leering men, each call of a higher bid striking her like a physical blow. $200 for this fine young woman. Can I get $250? She cooks, she cleans. She'll make some lucky man a fine wife. Olivia fought to keep her face expressionless, despite the humiliation burning through her. She had arrived in Columbia just 3 weeks ago with dreams of teaching at the schoolhouse, only to find the position already filled and her meager savings dwindling rapidly. Then came the typhoid that had swept through town, claiming her traveling companion and leaving Olivia with medical debts she couldn't hope to repay. The town's solution had been simple and horrifying: a wife auction to settle her debts. Legal or not, the frontier town operated by its own rules, and a woman without family or means had few protections. 300, called a portly businessman with yellowed teeth and hands that looked as though they'd never seen a day of honest labor. 350. Countered a grizzled miner who reeked of whiskey even from 20 feet away. Olivia's gaze swept desperately across the crowd, searching for any sign of compassion. Most of the townsfolk had turned out for the spectacle, men and women, both the men to bid or gawk, the women watching with expressions ranging from sympathy to thinly veiled relief that it wasn't them standing on the auction block. At the back of the crowd stood a tall figure, partially obscured by shadow. He leaned against a hitching post, his face hidden beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. Unlike the others, he seemed to be studying her not as property, but as a person in distress. $500. Called the miner to scattered whistles and murmurs. $550. The businessman mopped sweat from his brow, his eyes never leaving Olivia's form. The auctioneer, a wiry man with an oversized mustache and the smell of cheap cologne, grinned broadly. $550 going once. $1,000. The voice cut through the crowd like a knife, deep and steady. The crowd parted as the man from the back straightened and stepped forward. Dust clung to his trail-worn clothes, and a week's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. But his eyes, startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, held a steady determination. "Did I hear correctly, Mr. Blackwell?" the auctioneer asked, surprise evident in his voice. "The name's Samuel Byrne," the stranger corrected firmly. "And you heard me. $1,000. A hush fell over the crowd. The amount was staggering enough to buy prime farmland or a small herd of cattle. The miner and businessman exchanged looks, then both shook their heads. They couldn't match such a sum. 1,000 going once, going twice. The auctioneer's gaze swept the silent crowd. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Olivia's knees nearly buckled. She had been sold, actually sold to this stranger. Would her fate be any better with him than with the others? She watched numbly as he approached the makeshift stage, his spurs jingling softly with each step. The auctioneer extended a hand to collect payment, but Samuel Byrne ignored him, instead looking directly at Olivia. "Miss," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear, "I believe you've been through enough indignity for one day. I have no intention of claiming ownership of you or anyone else." He reached into his vest and extracted a wad of bills, counting out the full amount before handing it to the auctioneer. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he turned back to Olivia and offered her his hand. "You're free to go wherever you please. I'll see that no one follows." Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, scarcely believing what she was hearing. I don't understand." "It's simple," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. No person should be bought or sold. I'm giving you back your freedom. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The businessman who had been outbid scoffed loudly. You're wasting good money, Cowboy. She still owes her debts. They're paid now, Samuel replied without taking his eyes off Olivia. The lady is free to choose her own path. Tentatively, Olivia placed her hand in his and allowed him to help her down from the platform. Her legs shook beneath her, and she was acutely aware of the stares from the townspeople. I cannot begin to thank you, she whispered. But, sir, I have nothing with which to repay such a debt. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It's not a debt, Miss Caldwell. Olivia Caldwell, Miss Caldwell. Consider it a stand against an injustice that should never have happened. The crowd began to disperse, many casting disapproving glances their way. The auctioneer pocketed the money with a shrug, clearly indifferent to the unexpected outcome as long as he received his fee. You have somewhere to go? Samuel asked, his voice low. Olivia hesitated. The truth was, she had nowhere. The tiny room she'd been renting had already been cleared out, her few possessions held as collateral against her debts. I thought as much, he said, noting her silence. I have a room at the Columbia Hotel. You can have it for the night. I'll find other accommodations. Tomorrow we can figure out your next steps. Why are you doing this? Olivia couldn't help asking. You don't know me. Samuel Byrne looked at her directly, and in his gaze she saw not pity but a deep well of conviction. Because my mother was once in a position not unlike yours. No one helped her. I swore I'd never stand by if I could make a difference. As they walked away from the auction site, Olivia felt the weight of stares upon her back. Her future remained uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something stir within her chest. Something dangerously close to hope. Samuel Byrne maintained a respectful distance as they walked, yet she could feel his protective presence beside her. The cowboy had spent a fortune to buy her freedom, expecting nothing in return. In the harsh world of the frontier, such acts of selflessness were as rare as desert rain. The Columbia Hotel stood 3 stories tall, one of the few brick buildings in town. Its faded elegance spoke of better days, but it was still the finest establishment in Columbia. As they entered the lobby, the desk clerk eyed them suspiciously, his gaze lingering on Olivia's red dress, the only presentable garment she still owned. Mr. Byrne, the clerk acknowledged stiffly. I see you've acquired company from the auction. Watch your implications, Morris, Samuel warned, his voice level but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Miss Caldwell is a lady deserving of respect. She'll be staying in my room tonight. I'll need a separate room for myself. The clerk's eyebrows shot up. We're nearly full with the cattle buyers in town. Only have the small room at the back near the kitchen. That'll do fine. Samuel turned to Olivia. Room 204. The key's there on the hook. I'll have some food sent up. Mr. Byrne, Olivia said hesitantly. I cannot possibly accept. You can and you will, he interrupted gently. It's one night of safety, Miss Caldwell. Nothing more, nothing less. She wanted to argue, to insist that she couldn't accept such charity, but exhaustion and the events of the day overwhelmed her. With a small nod, she took the key the clerk reluctantly handed over. Thank you, she whispered. Samuel tipped his hat. Get some rest, Miss Caldwell. Tomorrow will be soon enough to make decisions. As Olivia climbed the stairs to the second floor, she couldn't help glancing back. Samuel Byrne stood watching her, a silent guardian ensuring she reached her destination safely. Only when she disappeared down the hallway did he turn to make his own arrangements. The room was modest but clean, with a large bed, washstand, and window overlooking the main street. Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, her composure finally crumbling as the reality of how close she'd come to a fate worse than death washed over her. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. A gentle knock at the door startled her. Hastily wiping away her tears, she opened it to find a young maid with a tray of food and a small bundle. "Mr. Byrne sent this up, madam," the girl said, setting the tray on a small table. "And these are some clothes Mrs. Higgins from the dress shop sent over. Said they're extras she can spare until you get settled." "Mrs. Higgins?" Olivia asked in confusion. "I don't know her." The maid shrugged. "Mr. Byrne stopped by her shop on his way back, paid her for these things, said it wasn't right for a lady to have only one dress." After the maid left, Olivia examined the bundle. A simple blue calico dress, undergarments, a nightgown, and a hairbrush. Nothing fancy, but clean and practical. More kindness from a stranger who'd already given so much. She ate sparingly, though the stew and bread were the first proper meal she'd had in days. Then she washed with the water from the pitcher, changed into the nightgown, and climbed into the bed. Despite her tumultuous thoughts, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. Morning came with golden light streaming through the curtains. For a moment, Olivia couldn't remember where she was, and then the events of the previous day flooded back. She dressed quickly in the blue calico, grateful for its modest cut and clean fabric. Her red dress, the one she'd worn on the auction block, she folded and placed at the bottom of the bundle, hoping never to wear it again. Another knock came at her door just as she finished pinning up her hair. Samuel Byrne stood in the hallway, looking somewhat refreshed though still travel-worn. He'd shaved, she noticed, revealing a strong jaw and a small scar near his chin. "I trust you slept well, Miss Caldwell," he asked, his hat in his hands. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Mr. Byrne, I cannot begin to express my gratitude for everything you've done." He nodded, seemingly uncomfortable with her thanks. "I've arranged breakfast in the hotel dining room. If you're agreeable, we can discuss your plans." The dining room was nearly empty at this early hour. They were seated at a corner table, away from curious eyes, and served coffee and a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Now," Samuel said after they'd eaten in companionable silence for a few minutes, "I meant what I said yesterday. You're free to choose your own path. But if I may ask, what brought you to Columbia in the first place?" Olivia cradled her coffee cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I came to teach. I had a letter from the school board offering me a position, but when I arrived, they'd already hired someone else, a man who'd arrived just days before me. With the war still casting its shadow and so many men needing work, they chose him." She sighed. "I had savings enough for a few weeks, but then typhoid swept through town. My traveling companion, Eleanor, fell ill. I stayed to nurse her, but she didn't survive. The doctor's bills took everything I had." Samuel listened intently, his blue eyes never leaving her face. "And you have no family to return to?" "No," Olivia said softly. "My parents died in a fire 3 years ago. Our farm in Kentucky was lost to taxes. I've been making my way as a teacher since then, moving from town to town. And now," she set down her cup with a small, determined gesture, "now I must find work, repay you, and start again, perhaps in another town where my circumstances won't be known." Samuel shook his head firmly. "There's nothing to repay, Miss Caldwell." $1,000 is a fortune," she protested. "I cannot possibly accept such charity." "It's not charity," he countered. "Think of it as righting a wrong." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Samuel spoke again. "I have a proposition, if you're willing to hear it." Olivia tensed slightly, years of caution making her wary of propositions from men, Noting her reaction, he hastened to clarify. "Not that kind of proposition, Miss Caldwell. I assure you my intentions are honorable." "I'm listening," she said cautiously. "I own a ranch about 15 miles west of town. River's Edge, it's called. Not the biggest spread in Missouri, but good land with a decent herd. There's a small cabin on the property that was meant for the foreman, but I've never hired one. It's been sitting empty." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The local school near my ranch is looking for a teacher for the fall term. It's a small place, just a dozen or so children from the surrounding farms. The pay isn't much, but with the cabin provided, you could live comfortably enough." Olivia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You're offering me a teaching position." "Not exactly," he clarified. "I have no authority to offer the position, but I'm on good terms with the school board. I could introduce you, speak on your behalf." The decision would be theirs, of course, but teachers are scarce in these parts. "And the cabin? You'd let me stay there while I apply for this position?" Samuel nodded. "It needs some cleaning, but it's solid and weathertight. You'd have complete privacy and independence." "My own house is a quarter-mile away, across the creek. You'd be safe there and free from the gossip of town." It seemed too good to be true. A chance to teach again, a place to live, all offered by this enigmatic man who'd already saved her once. "Why would you do this?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. A shadow passed over Samuel's face. "As I said, my mother faced similar hardships. She was widowed young with a small child, me, and no means of support. She ended up—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "She made choices no woman should have to make, just to keep us alive. By the time I was old enough to help her, the consumption had taken hold. I promised her I'd never stand by when I could help someone in need." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Olivia felt her suspicions melting away, replaced by a growing respect for this cowboy with his quiet strength and surprising depth. "If the school board agrees," she said slowly, "I would be grateful for the opportunity. And for the cabin, until I can establish myself." Relief flooded his features. "Good, that's good." He reached into his vest and withdrew a small purse. "Here's some money for immediate necessities." "No," Olivia interrupted firmly. "You've already done too much. I cannot accept more money." Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded with what might have been approval. "All right, but the offer stands if you need it." He rose from the table. "I have some business to conclude in town. If you're amenable, we can leave for the ranch tomorrow morning." "So soon?" Olivia asked, surprised. "Unless you have reasons to stay in Columbia." There was a question in his tone. Olivia thought of the stares and whispers that would follow her through town, the memory of standing on that auction block fresh in everyone's mind. "No," she said firmly. "No reason at all. Tomorrow, then." Samuel settled his hat on his head. "I'll meet you here at 8. As he turned to leave, Olivia called after him. "Mr. Byrne, thank you for everything." He paused, looking back at her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Caldwell. Even those who did nothing wrong to begin with." With that, he was gone, leaving Olivia to contemplate the extraordinary turn her fortunes had taken. Yesterday, she had been a woman without hope, sold on an auction block. Today, she was free, with prospects of employment and shelter, all thanks to a cowboy who believed in doing what was right. For the first time in months, Olivia allowed herself to feel something dangerous and fragile: hope. The following morning dawned clear and promising. Olivia had spent the previous day quietly, venturing out only to purchase a few essentials with the last of the money she'd managed to keep hidden in the hem of her dress. She'd avoided the main streets, unwilling to face the curious stares of the townsfolk. Samuel arrived precisely at 8, driving a sturdy wagon laden with supplies. He wore the same trail-worn clothes, but his horse, a magnificent bay stallion, was freshly groomed and outfitted with a well-maintained saddle. "Good morning, Miss Caldwell," he greeted, helping her into the wagon with a gentlemanly hand. "I trust you're ready for the journey, as ready as I'll ever be," she replied, settling her small bundle beside her. It contained everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, and a locket containing miniature portraits of her parents. Samuel handled the team of horses with quiet competence, guiding them through the streets of Columbia and out onto the western road. As the town receded behind them, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. "It'll take about 3 hours to reach River's Edge," Samuel explained as they traveled. "The road's decent until the last few miles." Olivia nodded, content to watch the landscape unfold around them. Missouri in summer was a beautiful sight: rolling hills clothed in green, fields of wheat and corn rippling in the breeze, wildflowers painting the meadows with splashes of color. "Have you lived in Missouri long, Mr. Byrne?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About 5 years," he replied. "Before that, I drove cattle up from Texas, worked ranches in Colorado and Kansas. Took me a while to find the right piece of land." "And your family, are they nearby?" A shadow passed over his face. "My mother passed when I was 16. No siblings, no father that I ever knew." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "It's not easy being alone in the world." Samuel glanced at her with understanding in his eyes. "No, it's not, but it makes a person stronger in certain ways." They fell into conversation as the miles passed beneath the wagon wheels. Samuel spoke of his ranch, 2,000 acres with a herd of prime Hereford cattle, a sturdy house he'd built himself, a creek that never ran dry even in the hottest summers. Olivia shared stories of her teaching experiences, the children she'd encountered, her love of literature and history. By midday, when they stopped to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apples, Olivia realized she felt more at ease in Samuel Byrne's company than she had with anyone in a long while. There was something solid and reassuring about him, a quiet strength that demanded nothing in return. "What made you decide to settle in Missouri?" she asked as they resumed their journey. Samuel squinted against the sun. "The land reminded me of a place my mother used to describe from her childhood in Virginia. Green hills, good water, 4 proper seasons, and it was far enough from my past that I could start fresh." "Is that what everyone seeks on the frontier, a fresh start?" "Most, I reckon," he agreed. "Some are running from something, some running toward something. Me, I just wanted a place where I could build something that would last." The wagon turned onto a narrower road, little more than a track through the countryside. Cresting a hill, Samuel pulled the team to a stop. "There it is," he said, a note of pride in his voice. River's Edge. Spread before them was a verdant valley, bisected by a winding creek that glinted silver in the afternoon sun. A neat wooden house stood on a small rise, surrounded by a few outbuildings and corrals. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on lush pastureland. On the near side of the creek, partially obscured by a stand of cottonwoods, sat a smaller cabin. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, genuinely impressed. The setting was idyllic, far more appealing than the dusty streets of Columbia. "Home," Samuel said simply, urging the horses forward. As they descended into the valley, a man emerged from one of the barns, waving a greeting. He was older, with grizzled gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. "That's Hank Patterson," Samuel explained. "Works the ranch with me. Only hired hand I keep year-round. Good man, though he talks more to horses than people. The old cowboy approached as they pulled up near the main house. Boss, he acknowledged with a nod to Samuel. His curious gaze shifted to Olivia, but there was no judgment in it, only mild interest. Hank, this is Miss Olivia Caldwell, Samuel introduced. She'll be staying in the foreman's cabin while she applies for the teaching position at Willow Creek School. Madam, Hank touched the brim of his hat respectfully. That school's been needing a proper teacher since old Miss Winters took ill last winter. Children been running half wild. I look forward to the challenge, Mr. Patterson, Olivia replied warmly. Samuel handed the reins to Hank. I'll take Miss Caldwell to the cabin and get her settled. How's that new calf doing? Strong as his mama, Hank reported. That Hereford bull of yours throws good stock. With a nod, Samuel helped Olivia down from the wagon and collected her bundle. They walked together toward the creek, following a well-worn path through tall grass dotted with wildflowers. Hank knows everything that happens on this ranch, Samuel commented. Not much for words, but he sees all. Been with me since I bought this place. They crossed the creek on a sturdy footbridge, the water burbling pleasantly beneath them. The cabin came fully into view as they approached a simple but well-built structure of squared logs with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. It's not fancy, Samuel said, a touch of apology in his voice as he opened the door, but it's weather-tight and sound. Olivia stepped inside, immediately struck by the cabin's simple charm. It consisted of one main room with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, a bed frame with a straw tick mattress, a dresser, and shelves built into the walls. A curtained alcove presumably contained a washstand. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It's perfect, she said sincerely, turning to face Samuel. Far better than I expected. Relief flickered across his features. It needs a good cleaning, been empty for a while. He moved to the fireplace, setting her bundle on the table. There's firewood stacked outside, a pump for water at the back. Outhouse is just beyond the tree line there. I'll have it spotless in no time, Olivia assured him, already planning how she would arrange her few belongings to make the space her own. I took the liberty of stocking some basic provisions, Samuel said, indicating a cupboard beside the fireplace. Flour, coffee, salt, some dried beans and such, should tide you over for a few days. He hesitated. I'll ride over to the Willow Creek School Board chairman tomorrow, let him know you're interested in the position. Thank you, Olivia said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness this virtual stranger had shown her. Mr. Byrne, I don't know how I can ever repay. There's nothing to repay, he interrupted gently. As I said before, everyone deserves a chance. He moved toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. I'll leave you to get settled. If you need anything, just come up to the main house. It's not proper for me to visit you here alone, but Hank is usually around the barns if you need to send word. Olivia was touched by his concern for her reputation, especially after everything she'd been through. Mr. Byrne, she said before he could leave, may I ask you something? He paused, one hand on the doorframe. Of course. In Columbia, at the auction, how did you happen to be there? It seems a remarkable coincidence. A complicated expression crossed his face. Not entirely coincidence. I come to town once a month for supplies and mail. That day, I overheard talk in the general store about a wife auction. Such things aren't legal, whatever the townsfolk might pretend, and I. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I've seen what happens to women with no choices. I couldn't stand by. His simple explanation, delivered without any attempt to paint himself as heroic, only increased Olivia's estimation of him. This was a man of principle, rare enough in a world where most looked out only for themselves. "Well," she said softly, "I'm very glad you didn't stand by." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion Olivia couldn't quite name, before he nodded and stepped outside. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Caldwell. Good evening." "Good evening, Mr. Byrne." As his footsteps receded down the path, Olivia turned slowly in a circle, taking in her new temporary home. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, culminating in the humiliation of the auction block, she suddenly found herself with shelter, prospects, and a benefactor who asked nothing in return. It seemed almost too good to be true. Yet there was something about Samuel Byrne that inspired trust, a fundamental decency that shone through his reserved exterior. Whatever his reasons for helping her, Olivia was certain they were honorable. With renewed energy, she set about making the cabin habitable. There was dust to sweep, floors to scrub, bedding to air in the sunshine. The physical labor was welcome after days of helpless anxiety, and by sunset, the cabin was transformed into a cozy haven. As darkness fell, Olivia lit the oil lamp and settled at the small table with a cup of tea. Through the window, she could see lights glowing in the main house across the creek. Samuel Byrne was there, perhaps going about his evening routines, unaware of how completely he had changed one woman's life in the space of 2 days. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Olivia Caldwell felt safe. And with that safety came the luxury of hope for a teaching position, for independence, for a future not defined by desperation. If there was also a small flutter in her heart when she thought of a certain blue-eyed cowboy with quiet strength and unexpected kindness. Well, that was something to examine another day. True to his word, Samuel rode out early the next morning to speak with the school board chairman. Olivia spent the day further improving her cabin, hanging the calico curtains Mrs. Higgins had included with the clothes, and exploring the immediate surroundings. The creek provided a pleasant backdrop of gentle sounds, and wildflowers grew in abundance along its banks. She gathered a small bouquet, placing them in a jar on the table to brighten the cabin. It was nearly sunset when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking out the window, she saw Samuel dismounting from his bay stallion. He appeared tired but satisfied as he approached the cabin. Olivia met him on the porch, anxious for news. "Mr. Byrne, welcome back. How did you fare with the school board?" "Better than expected," he replied, removing his hat. "Chairman Whitaker was quite interested when I mentioned your credentials. They've asked if you can meet with the full board this Saturday. If all goes well, the position could be yours before the week is out." Joy surged through her. "That's wonderful news. Thank you for speaking on my behalf." "I merely opened the door, Miss Caldwell. Your qualifications will do the rest." He glanced past her into the cabin. "I see you've been busy. The place looks transformed." "It just needed a woman's touch," she said, pleased by his notice. "Would you care to come in? I've made coffee." Samuel hesitated, clearly mindful of propriety. "Perhaps for a moment. It's been a long ride." Inside, the cabin did indeed look different from the day before. Everything gleamed with cleanliness, and small touches the wildflowers. A neatly arranged bookshelf with the few books Olivia owned. The curtains framing the windows had turned the utilitarian space into a home. Samuel sat at the table while Olivia poured coffee into the 2 mismatched cups she'd found in the cupboard. There was an ease between them that belied their short acquaintance. "The chairman asked about your previous teaching experience," Samuel mentioned as he accepted the cup. "I told him you'd taught in Kentucky and elsewhere, but I realize I don't know the details myself." Olivia sat across from him, cradling her own cup. "I started teaching at 17, just after my parents died. First in our home county in Kentucky, then in Tennessee for a year, then briefly in Illinois before coming to Missouri. Small schools mostly, children of farmers and tradespeople. And you enjoy it, teaching. Her face lit up. Very much. There's something remarkable about watching a child grasp a new concept that moment when confusion transforms into understanding. And books opening young minds to the worlds contained in books is perhaps the greatest privilege. Samuel watched her as she spoke, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You're passionate about education. It's the great equalizer, Olivia said firmly. A child with knowledge has possibilities, regardless of their circumstances. My own education was limited, Samuel admitted. Mostly what my mother could teach me, plus a year or two of proper schooling when we lived in a town large enough to have one. The rest I've pieced together over the years. Yet you speak well and clearly run a successful ranch, Olivia observed. Education takes many forms, Mr. Byrne. He acknowledged this with a small nod, then changed the subject. Is there anything you need from town before Saturday? I'm sending Hank in tomorrow for supplies. Perhaps some writing paper and ink if it's not too much trouble. I'd like to prepare some sample lessons for the board. Of course. Samuel finished his coffee and rose to leave. I've been thinking about your transportation to the school, should you get the position. It's 3 miles to Willow Creek, too far to walk daily. There's a gentle mare in my stable that would suit you if you ride. I do, though it's been some time, Olivia admitted. That's very generous. She needs the exercise, he said dismissively. Bessie's getting fat on grass and not much else. Olivia smiled, recognizing his attempt to downplay his generosity. Then I would be doing you a service by riding her. A rare grin transformed Samuel's serious face. Exactly so, Miss Caldwell. As he reached the door, he paused, his expression turning more solemn. There's something you should be prepared for on Saturday. Columbia is a small town in some ways and news travels. The board may have heard about your circumstances. Olivia's heart sank. Of course the story of the auction would have spread. Do you think it will prejudice them against me? It shouldn't, Samuel said firmly. None of what happened was your fault, but people can be narrow-minded. If questions arise, answer honestly, but remember you have nothing to be ashamed of. His unwavering support bolstered her courage. Thank you for the warning. I'll be prepared. After Samuel left, Olivia stood on the porch watching his tall figure recede into the gathering dusk. In just a few days, this man had become her champion, her benefactor, and perhaps her friend. It was a strange feeling for a woman who had learned to rely solely on herself. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for the ride to Willow Creek. Samuel had delivered the promised mare the day before, a placid chestnut with a white blaze along with a serviceable side saddle that he claimed had been taking up space in the barn. Olivia dressed in her best attire, the blue calico, freshly pressed, with her mother's locket at her throat. She pinned her hair in a neat, professional style and gathered the sample lessons she had prepared. Samuel was waiting at the footbridge when she emerged from the cabin, mounted on his bay stallion. He looked different today, cleaner, more polished. He traded his work clothes for a well-cut jacket and fresh shirt, though he still wore his customary hat. "Good morning, Miss Caldwell," he greeted her. "You look ready to impress a school board." "I hope so," she replied, mounting Bessie with practiced ease despite the years since she'd last ridden. "I confess I'm rather nervous." "They'd be fools not to hire you," he said simply, as if stating an obvious fact. They rode side by side along country lanes, Samuel pointing out landmarks and sharing bits of local history. Willow Creek proved to be a smaller settlement than Columbia, just a cluster of buildings around a crossroads, serving the surrounding farms and ranches. The school itself, was a tidy white clapboard building with a bell tower, sitting on a small rise overlooking the creek that gave the community its name. Several horses and wagons were already tied up outside, indicating that the board members had arrived. "Remember," Samuel said quietly as they dismounted, "you have nothing to be ashamed of. Stand tall." Inside, 5 men sat at a table at the front of the schoolroom, a mix of ages and apparent backgrounds, all regarding her with curious expressions. Samuel introduced her to Chairman Whittaker, a portly man with kind eyes and a scholarly demeanor, who then presented the rest of the board. The interview began formally enough, with questions about Olivia's education, teaching experience, and approaches to discipline and curriculum. She answered confidently, sharing anecdotes from her previous positions and outlining her educational philosophy. Then, as Samuel had warned might happen, the questioning took a more personal turn. "Miss Caldwell," said Mr. Davis, a stern-faced farmer with calloused hands, "we've heard some concerning reports about your recent situation in Columbia. Is it true you were involved in some sort of auction?" Olivia felt her cheeks burn, but she met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir, though not by choice. After falling into debt due to medical expenses, I was forced into a situation where the town authorities in Columbia arranged what they termed a wife auction to settle those debts. It was not something I entered into willingly." Murmurs rippled through the men. Chairman Whittaker frowned deeply. "Such practices are not legal, whatever Columbia might pretend." "No, sir, they are not," Olivia agreed. "Mr. Byrne intervened and ensured my debts were paid, allowing me my freedom. I am deeply grateful for his assistance, but I assure you, I seek this position on my own merits as an educator." Samuel, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Gentlemen, if I may speak plainly, Miss Caldwell was the victim of an injustice, not a participant in anything improper. Her character is beyond reproach. She found herself, as many do on the frontier, in circumstances beyond her control. What matters is her considerable skill as a teacher." His steadfast defense touched Olivia deeply. The board members exchanged glances, and she could sense the tide of opinion shifting. "Well said, Byrne," Chairman Whittaker nodded. "Miss Caldwell, while we must be mindful of community standards, teaching children is a position of moral responsibility. After all, I believe we can separate unfortunate circumstances from personal character." The remainder of the interview returned to professional matters. Olivia presented her sample lessons, discussed her ideas for the school term beginning in September, and answered questions about handling the multiple grade levels that would be present in the one-room schoolhouse. Finally, the board asked her to step outside while they deliberated. Samuel accompanied her to the porch, where they waited in tense silence. "You were magnificent in there," he said after a moment. "Direct and dignified, exactly right. Your support meant everything," Olivia replied softly. "Thank you for standing up for me." Before he could respond, the door opened, and Chairman Whittaker beckoned them back inside. The board members were all standing, their expressions unreadable. "Miss Caldwell," the chairman began formally, "after careful consideration of your qualifications and interview, the Willow Creek School Board would like to offer you the position of teacher for the coming school year, beginning the first Monday in September and continuing through May of next year. The salary is $40 per month, with a wood allowance for heating the schoolhouse in winter." Joy and relief flooded through Olivia. "I accept with gratitude, Mr. Whittaker." "Excellent." The chairman's face broke into a smile as he extended his hand. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Miss Caldwell. I believe you'll find our community welcomes those who contribute to the education of our youth." The other board members offered their congratulations, even the stern Mr. Davis unbending enough to express his approval of her educational plans. Papers were signed, details discussed, and by early afternoon, Olivia Caldwell was officially the new teacher of Willow Creek School. As they rode back toward River's Edge, Olivia felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. "I can scarcely believe it," she said, smiling broadly at Samuel. "A position, a salary, a new beginning." "You earned it," he replied, looking genuinely pleased for her. "The board was impressed by your knowledge and poise. And by your endorsement," she added. "Your standing in the community clearly carries weight." Samuel shrugged modestly. "I'm just a rancher who pays his taxes and keeps to himself mostly. But I do business honestly, which counts for something in these parts." They rode in companionable silence for a while, Olivia lost in plans for her classroom, Samuel seemingly content with the quiet. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling countryside, painting everything in warm, golden hues. "We should celebrate your success," Samuel said as they neared River's Edge. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent steak. Would you join me for supper at the main house?" Olivia hesitated only briefly. While propriety might suggest caution about dining alone with a bachelor in his home after everything they'd been through, such concerns seemed trivial. "I'd be delighted," she said warmly. "Perhaps I can contribute by baking a pie, Mrs. Higgins included some dried apples with the provisions. "You've got yourself a deal, Miss Caldwell." Samuel's smile, rare but transformative, made her heart beat a little faster. That evening marked a shift in their relationship. Over a simple but delicious meal in Samuel's comfortable home, they talked for hours not as benefactor and recipient, but as equals with shared interests and complementary perspectives. Samuel spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd and perhaps eventually build a larger house. Olivia shared her hopes for the school, her love of literature, her desire to bring advanced education to frontier children. As the evening drew to a close, neither seemed eager for it to end. Finally, Samuel escorted her back to her cabin by lantern light, the stars blazing overhead in the clear summer sky. "Thank you for tonight," Olivia said as they reached her door. "Not just for the meal, but for everything these past days." Samuel stood in the lantern's glow, his face half in shadow, his eyes reflecting the warm light. "Having you here has been a pleasant change, Miss Caldwell. River's Edge can be a lonely place sometimes." The simple admission of loneliness from this strong, self-sufficient man touched something deep within her. On impulse, Olivia reached out and briefly touched his arm. "Please, after all we've shared, won't you call me Olivia?" He looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Olivia," he said, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Samuel." "Samuel," she echoed softly. Something electric passed between them in that moment, a recognition of growing feelings neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Then Samuel stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Olivia. Sleep well." "Good night, Samuel." As she watched him cross the footbridge back toward his house, Olivia pressed a hand to her racing heart. She had come to River's Edge seeking safety and a new start. She hadn't expected to find herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy who had saved her from a life of servitude. Such feelings were dangerous, she knew. Samuel had been clear from the beginning he'd helped her because it was right, not because he expected anything in return. The last thing she wanted was for him to think she felt obligated to him in some way. Yet as she prepared for bed, Olivia couldn't deny the warmth that filled her whenever he was near, or the way her day brightened at the sight of him. It wasn't gratitude she felt, or at least, not only gratitude. But whether Samuel Byrne could ever return such feelings remained a mystery as impenetrable as the man himself. The weeks of August passed in a pleasant rhythm as Olivia settled into life at River's Edge and prepared for the school term. 3 times a week, she rode Bessie to Willow Creek to clean and organize the schoolhouse, prepare lessons, and familiarize herself with the community. Samuel was often busy with ranch work, but they established a habit of sharing Sunday suppers, sometimes at his house, sometimes at her cabin. Through these meals and occasional shared rides, Olivia learned more about the enigmatic cowboy who had so changed her fate. Samuel was, she discovered, a man of surprising depths, largely self-taught but widely read, with a keen interest in everything from cattle breeding to poetry. He spoke little of his past before coming to Missouri, but Olivia gathered it had not been an easy road. "My mother worked in a boarding house in Kansas City after my father left," he revealed one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "She did what she could to provide for us, but it was never enough. When I was 12, I started working at the stockyards, hard, dangerous work for a boy, but the pay helped keep food on our table." "You were just a child," Olivia said softly. Samuel shrugged. "Many children work. I was luckier than most. I grew tall early, strong too. By 15, I was riding with cattle drives, learning the business from the ground up. When Mother died the next year, I had at least had a trade." "Is that when you decided to have your own ranch someday?" He nodded, sipping from his coffee cup. "I saw the men who owned the herds, not just the men who drove them. I wanted security, independence. Took 10 years of saving every penny, learning everything I could before I found this place." "You've built something remarkable," Olivia said sincerely, looking out over the peaceful valley bathed in golden light. Samuel turned to her, his expression unusually open. "I'm proud of it. But lately, I've been thinking it's not enough to build something if there's no one to share it with." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Olivia's heart quickened, but before she could respond, Hank's arrival with news of a broken fence line ended the moment. Such instances, fleeting but increasingly frequent, suggested Samuel might be developing feelings that matched her own growing attachment. Yet neither seemed quite ready to broach the subject directly. The first day of school arrived in early September with perfect weather and 22 eager, or in some cases, not so eager, students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Olivia threw herself into teaching with enthusiasm, quickly winning over even the most reluctant learners with her genuine interest in their progress and innovative methods. Word of the new teacher's skill spread through the community, and parents began stopping by to meet her after school hours. Invitations to Sunday dinners at farmhouses followed, which Olivia accepted gratefully. In these social settings, she was often asked about her connection to Samuel Byrne. "Mr. Byrne has been kind enough to provide accommodation at his ranch while I establish myself here," she would explain carefully, conscious of potential gossip. "Never known Byrne to take such an interest," one farmer's wife commented with raised eyebrows. "Keeps to himself mostly, that one. Must see something special in you." Such remarks made Olivia both hopeful and cautious. Her feelings for Samuel had deepened from gratitude to genuine affection, and increasingly to something more profound. But was she imagining the subtle changes in his behavior toward her, the lingering glances, the way he found reasons to ride by the schoolhouse on her teaching days, the gentle touches when he helped her mount Bessie? September yielded to October, bringing cooler temperatures and the vibrant colors of autumn to the Missouri countryside. One Saturday morning, as Olivia was gathering late wildflowers near the creek, she heard approaching hoofbeats and looked up to see Samuel riding toward her. "Good morning," she called, shielding her eyes against the bright autumn sun. He dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his horse the final few yards. "Morning. I was hoping to find you home." Something in his tone caught her attention. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, just—" He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "I need to ride to Kansas City on business. The cattle buyer I usually deal with wants to discuss a larger contract for next spring. I'll be gone about a week." "Oh." Olivia was surprised by the pang of disappointment she felt. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning, first light." He shifted his weight, hat in hands. "I wanted to make sure you'll be all right here alone. Hank will stay on, of course, and check on you daily." "I'll be fine," she assured him. "I have school to keep me busy, and I've grown quite comfortable here." She paused, then added softly, "Though I'll miss our Sunday suppers." Samuel's eyes met hers, and in them she saw a reflection of her own feelings. "As will I." They stood in silence for a moment, the babbling creek and rustling leaves the only sounds. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat. "There was another reason I wanted to see you before leaving. I've been thinking. That is, I wondered if you might accompany me to the harvest dance in Willow Creek when I return." The harvest dance, the community's major social event of the autumn, where couples gathered for music, food, and celebration. Olivia felt warmth spreading through her at the realization that Samuel was asking to escort her publicly, as a suitor might. "I would like that very much," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. Relief visibly washed over him. "Good, that's good," he smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his serious features. "I'll return by next Friday then. The dance is Saturday evening." "I'll look forward to it," Olivia said, her heart light with happiness. As Samuel prepared to mount his horse, he hesitated, then reached into his saddlebag. "I almost forgot. I picked this up for you in town yesterday." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Curious, Olivia unwrapped it to find a beautifully bound copy of Tennyson's poems. "Oh, Samuel," she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "It's beautiful. How did you know I love Tennyson? You mentioned it once when we were discussing what you might teach the older students." He looked pleased by her reaction. "I thought you might enjoy having your own copy instead of borrowing from the Whitacres' library." The thoughtfulness of the gift, that he had remembered such a small detail from their conversations, touched Olivia deeply. "Thank you. I shall treasure it." Their parting was reluctant, filled with unspoken emotions. As Samuel rode away, Olivia hugged the book to her chest, allowing herself to acknowledge what she had been feeling for weeks. She was falling in love with Samuel Byrne. The week of Samuel's absence passed slowly for Olivia, despite her busy schedule at the school. She found herself watching the road from the schoolhouse window, half expecting to see a familiar figure on horseback, even though she knew he was miles away in Kansas City. Each evening, she rayed from his gift, finding new meaning in Tennyson's romantic verses. By Friday, anticipation for both Samuel's return and the upcoming dance had Olivia in a state of pleasant distraction. After school, she rode directly to Willow Creek's small general store to purchase ribbon for her best dress, the one she had been saving for a special occasion. As she was selecting a suitable blue satin that would complement the dress's dove gray color, the bell above the door jangled, announcing another customer. Olivia looked up to see a well-dressed woman she didn't recognize enter the store, accompanied by a young girl of about 12. "Mrs. Fletcher, good afternoon," the shopkeeper greeted warmly. "I've just received those fabric samples you inquired about." "Wonderful," the woman replied, then noticed Olivia. "Oh, hello, you must be Miss Caldwell, the new teacher. I'm Margaret Fletcher. My daughter Louisa will be joining your class next week. We've just moved to the area." "It's a pleasure to meet you both," Olivia smiled, especially at the shy-looking girl. "I look forward to having you in class, Louisa." As they chatted about the school and community, Mrs. Fletcher mentioned their recent arrival from St. Louis following her husband's purchase of property near Willow Creek. "We're still getting acquainted with everyone," she explained. "Will you be attending the harvest dance tomorrow evening? I understand it's quite the social event." "Yes, I'm looking forward to it," Olivia replied. "Wonderful. Perhaps you can introduce us around. Are you attending with one of the local gentlemen?" The question was asked with polite interest, but Olivia detected the natural curiosity of a newcomer trying to understand community connections. "Yes, with Samuel Byrne. I'm staying in a cabin on his property while I establish myself here." Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose slightly. "Samuel Byrne, the rancher." When Olivia nodded, a strange expression crossed the woman's face. "How interesting." "I believe my husband may have some business with Mr. Byrne. The cattle business, you know." Something in her tone made Olivia uncomfortable, though she couldn't pinpoint why. "Mr. Byrne runs one of the finest herds in the county, from what I understand." "Yes, so I've heard." Mrs. Fletcher's manner remained cordial, but slightly cooler. "Well, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening, Miss Caldwell. Come, Louisa." As they left, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Fletcher had reacted oddly to Samuel's name. Perhaps it was nothing, just the natural reserve people often showed toward newcomers in small communities. Pushing aside her unease, Olivia completed her purchases and rode back to River's Edge, eagerly anticipating Samuel's return. To her delight, she spotted smoke rising from the chimney of the main house as she approached. He was home. Fighting the urge to ride directly to his door, Olivia instead returned to her cabin, tending to Bessie and changing out of her school clothes before walking across to the main house. She wanted to appear calm and collected, not like a lovesick girl rushing to greet a suitor. She found Samuel on the porch, looking tired from his journey but pleased to see her. He rose immediately as she approached. "Olivia," he greeted her, his voice warm. "I hoped you might stop by when you returned from school." "Welcome home," she said, suddenly shy despite their weeks of growing closeness. "How was your trip?" "Successful," he replied, gesturing for her to join him on the porch bench. "The buyer agreed to take twice as many head next spring at a better price than I'd hoped for. It will mean expanding the herd, more work, but—" He trailed off, looking out over his land. "It means security, a future." Something in the way he said future made Olivia's pulse quicken. "That's wonderful news, Samuel." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the yard. Finally, Samuel turned to her, his expression serious. "I missed you," he said simply. "Being in the city, surrounded by people and noise, all I could think about was getting back here. Back to River's Edge, back to you." Olivia's breath caught. "I missed you too," she admitted softly. "The days seemed longer without our conversations." Samuel reached over hesitantly and took her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused from years of ranch work, and it enveloped her smaller hand completely. "I've been thinking a great deal during my journey, Olivia, about what I want for the future, who I want to share it with." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by the arrival of Hank with an urgent question about a sick calf. Samuel released her hand reluctantly, promising to continue their conversation the next day at the dance. That night, Olivia could barely sleep, her mind filled with what Samuel might have been about to say. Had he been on the verge of declaring his feelings, proposing? Or was she reading too much into his words, allowing her own hopes to color her interpretation? By morning, she was a bundle of nervous energy. She spent the day cleaning her cabin, then carefully preparing for the dance, bathing in water heated on the stove, arranging her hair in an elegant style, and finally donning her gray dress, now adorned with the blue ribbon that matched Samuel's eyes. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock came at her door. Samuel stood there, more formally dressed than she had ever seen him, in a dark suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and for a moment Olivia hardly recognized the polished gentleman before her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low and sincere as his gaze took her in. "And you look very handsome," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. He offered his arm, leading her to where a buggy waited instead of horses. "I thought it more suitable for your dress," he explained, helping her up. The drive to Willow Creek was filled with easy conversation, yet Olivia sensed an underlying current of anticipation. Something had changed between them during Samuel's absence. A decision had been made, at least on his part. The schoolhouse had been transformed for the harvest dance. Desks pushed against walls, lanterns hanging from rafters, a space cleared for dancing, and tables laden with food brought by community members. A small group of local musicians played lively tunes, and several couples were already dancing when they arrived. Their entrance together did not go unnoticed. Olivia was well liked as the new teacher, but Samuel was something of an enigma to many in the community, respected but not truly known. To see him escorting anyone, let alone the pretty schoolteacher, caused a ripple of interest. Chairman Whittaker and his wife greeted them warmly, as did several of Olivia's students' parents. Samuel remained by her side, more sociable than she had ever seen him, even engaging in conversation with people he normally only nodded to in passing. As they joined the dancing, Samuel proved to be surprisingly graceful for such a large man. "Where did you learn to dance?" Olivia asked as he guided her expertly through a waltz. A small smile played at his lips. Kansas City had its share of social events. A young cowboy with ambitions quickly learns that business is often conducted in ballrooms as well as stockyards. They danced several numbers, then paused for refreshments. As Samuel went to fetch them punch, Olivia found herself approached by Mrs. Fletcher, who had been watching them with evident curiosity throughout the evening. "Miss Caldwell, you look lovely tonight," the woman greeted her, "and I see Mr. Byrne is quite attentive." "Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher. Are you enjoying the dance?" "Oh, yes." Small-town gatherings have their charm after St. Louis society. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you seem quite attached to Mr. Byrne." Olivia felt herself stiffen slightly. "Mr. Byrne has been very kind to me, Mrs. Fletcher's expression turned sympathetic. "My dear, I'm sure he has, but I feel I should mention my husband was in Kansas City last week on business. He saw Mr. Byrne there at one of the hotels with a woman. They seemed familiar with each other." The words struck Olivia like a physical blow. "I'm sure there's an explanation," she managed to say, though her mind was suddenly filled with doubt. "Mr. Byrne had business in the city." "Of course," Mrs. Fletcher patted her arm. "I just thought you should know. Men like Mr. Byrne, successful, unmarried, often have arrangements in the city. It doesn't mean they can't be perfect gentlemen in their home communities." Before Olivia could respond, Samuel returned with 2 cups of punch. He nodded politely to Mrs. Fletcher, who excused herself with a meaningful glance at Olivia. "Is everything all right?" Samuel asked, noticing her changed demeanor. "Yes, of course," Olivia replied automatically, accepting the punch though she no longer wanted it. "Just a bit warm from dancing." They rejoined the festivities, but Olivia found her enjoyment dimmed by Mrs. Fletcher's insinuations. She tried to dismiss them after all. What did she really know about this woman or her husband? Yet the seed of doubt had been planted, and she couldn't help wondering if there were aspects of Samuel's life he kept hidden from her. Sensing her distraction, Samuel suggested they step outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. They walked a little way from the schoolhouse, the sounds of music and laughter fading behind them. "Something's troubling you," Samuel said after a moment. Was it something Mrs. Fletcher said? Olivia hesitated. She had never been one to play games or harbor secret suspicions. Straightforwardness had always been her way. "She mentioned that her husband saw you in Kansas City, with a woman." Samuel stiffened beside her and Olivia's heart sank. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration rather than guilt. "Mrs. Fletcher's husband must have seen me with Claire," he said quietly. The name hit Olivia like another blow. Claire. A woman significant enough to be referred to by her first name. "I see," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "No, I don't think you do." Samuel turned to face her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "Claire Dawson is my mother's sister, my aunt. She lives in Kansas City, has for years. I always stay with her when I'm in the city on business. She's the only family I have left." Relief washed over Olivia so intensely she nearly swayed on her feet. "Your aunt," she repeated. "Yes, she's somewhat flamboyant, I suppose you'd say. Runs a dressmaking shop, does well for herself. We're often seen around town. When I visit, she insists on showing me off to her friends, taking me to restaurants." He smiled slightly. "I should have mentioned her to you before, but there's been so much else to talk about." Mrs. Fletcher made it sound as if. "I can imagine what she implied." Samuel's voice hardened slightly. "Small towns run on gossip, and newcomers often feel the need to establish themselves by sharing what they think they know." Olivia felt ashamed of her moment of doubt. "I'm sorry." "I shouldn't have questioned." "No," Samuel interrupted gently. "Never apologize for being direct with me, Olivia. I want nothing but honesty between us." The way he said "us," as if they were already a unit, a pair bonded by more than circumstance, gave Olivia courage. "What were you going to tell me yesterday?" she asked. Before Hank interrupted, Samuel took a deep breath, then reached for her hands. "I was going to tell you that my trip to Kansas City clarified something for me. Being away from River's Edge, away from you, made me realize how empty my life was before you came into it. How I've been building something all these years without really understanding what it was for." He paused, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. "Olivia, I know it hasn't been long since we met. Some might say it's too soon for what I'm feeling, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Olivia's heart was racing, her breath shallow with anticipation. "I love you," Samuel said simply. "I think I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you on that auction platform, not out of pity or a desire to rescue you, but because I saw your dignity, your strength even in such horrible circumstances." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "Samuel, I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he continued quickly. "I know you came here seeking independence, a new start. The last thing I want is for you to feel any obligation toward me because of what happened in Columbia." "It's not obligation I feel," Olivia said softly, finding her voice. "When you bought my freedom, you gave me a choice, the first real choice I'd had in months. And every day since then, I've chosen to spend time with you, to get to know you too." She took a deep breath. "To fall in love with you." Joy transformed Samuel's face. "You love me?" "Yes," Olivia smiled through her tears. "I love you, Samuel Byrne, not because you saved me, but because of who you are: kind, honorable, thoughtful. A man who reads poetry and remembers small details and treats everyone with respect." Samuel drew her closer, one hand gently cupping her cheek. "May I kiss you, Olivia Caldwell, please?" she whispered. His lips met hers with exquisite tenderness, a first kiss that spoke of reverence and promise. Olivia's arms slipped around his neck as she responded with all the love that had been growing in her heart these past months. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I'd like to court you properly if you'll allow it. And someday, when you're ready, no rush, no pressure, I hope you'll consider becoming my wife." "I think I'd like that very much," Olivia replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the schoolhouse, where light and music spilled into the night. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The courtship of Samuel Byrne and Olivia Caldwell became the talk of Willow Creek and the surrounding communities that fall. They were seen together at church, community gatherings, and school events. Samuel would often wait for Olivia after school, escorting her back to River's Edge on his horse while Bessie followed behind. On weekends, they rode side by side across the rolling hills of the ranch, Samuel pointing out boundary lines and explaining his plans for expansion for Olivia. These months were filled with a joy she had never known. Her teaching thrived as she gained the respect and affection of students and parents alike. The cabin by the creek became truly her home, filled with books, student papers, and small touches that reflected her personality. And each day, her love for Samuel deepened as she discovered new facets of the man behind the reserved exterior. By December, as winter settled over Missouri, bringing snow-laden skies and frost-covered mornings, Samuel began to speak more concretely about their future. "I've been thinking about building a new house," he mentioned one evening as they sat before the fire in his living room. "The current one was fine for a bachelor, but it's not really suitable for a family." Olivia's heart skipped at the mention of family. "What sort of house do you envision?" Samuel's eyes took on a distant look as he described his dream. A 2-story home with a broad porch wrapping around 3 sides, large windows to capture the valley views, a proper kitchen, and several bedrooms for children, eventually. As he spoke, Olivia could almost see the house taking shape, could imagine herself moving through its rooms, could picture their children playing in its hallways. "It sounds wonderful," she said softly. Samuel turned to her, taking her hand in his. "I'd like to begin building in the spring. But before I do, I need to know if it's truly what you want, Olivia. A life here with me. You've flourished as a teacher. I would never ask you to give that up. But marriage to a rancher means certain compromises, certain responsibilities." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I love teaching, yes, but I love you more. And there's no reason I couldn't continue at the school, at least until we have children. Many married women teach, especially in rural areas where teachers are scarce." "So you're saying—" Samuel's voice held a note of cautious hope. "I'm saying that when you're ready to ask the question that's been in your eyes for weeks now, my answer will be yes." Olivia smiled at him, her heart full. Samuel's face broke into that rare, transformative smile she had come to cherish. "I had planned something more formal, a proper proposal at Christmas, perhaps." "We've never been a conventional couple," Olivia reminded him. "Our beginning was hardly traditional." "True enough." Samuel reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. But perhaps there is no perfect moment, only perfect certainty." He moved from the sofa to kneel before her, opening the box to reveal a ring with a delicate gold band supporting a modest but beautiful diamond. "Olivia Caldwell, you've brought light and joy into my life when I least expected it but most needed it. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness blurred Olivia's vision. "Yes, Samuel, with all my heart, yes." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had always belonged there, and then she was in his arms, their kiss sealing a promise that had been building since that fateful day in Colombia. They decided on a spring wedding when the wildflowers would be in bloom and the new house well underway. The announcement was made at the Christmas pageant at Willow Creek School, where Olivia's students cheered enthusiastically, and parents offered hearty congratulations. Even Mrs. Fletcher, who had become somewhat friendlier after her initial faux pas, wished them well. Winter passed in a flurry of preparations. Construction on the new house began as soon as the ground thawed, with Samuel overseeing every detail. Olivia continued teaching while also planning their wedding and future home. On weekends, they often rode to the building site together, watching as their dream took physical form day by day. "It's really happening," Olivia marveled one April afternoon as they stood on what would soon be their front porch. The house's framework was complete, with walls rising and windows being fitted. From this vantage, they could see across the entire valley the creek winding its silver path, the cattle grazing on green spring grass, the distant hills turning purple in the late afternoon light. "Second chances," Samuel said quietly, his arm around her waist. "For both of us." The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May 1877, almost exactly 9 months after their first meeting. It would be held at the Willow Creek Church, with a celebration afterward at River's Edge. Samuel's Aunt Claire arrived from Kansas City a week early, a whirlwind of energy and fashion who immediately took charge of final preparations. "She reminds me of you, Samuel," Olivia commented after meeting the vivacious woman. "Same determination, same loyalty, just expressed rather differently." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, perfect spring weather for the occasion. Olivia dressed in the cabin where she had lived these past months, assisted by Claire and Chairman Whittaker's wife, who had become a dear friend. Her gown was simple but elegant ivory silk with delicate lace trim, made by Claire's expert hands. "You are a vision, my dear," Claire declared as she arranged Olivia's veil. "My nephew is the luckiest man in Missouri." "I'm the lucky one," Olivia replied softly, thinking of how far she had come from that auction platform in Columbia. A knock at the door announced Hank, looking uncomfortable but dignified in his best suit. The old cowboy had agreed to walk Olivia down the aisle, a role he took very seriously. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his weathered face breaking into an uncharacteristic smile, "it's time." The Willow Creek Church was filled to capacity with students, parents, neighbors, and friends from both communities. As Olivia walked down the aisle on Hank's arm, her eyes found Samuel waiting at the altar. The love and wonder in his gaze as he watched her approach made her heart swell with emotion. Their vows were simple and heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and cherish each other through all of life's joys and challenges. When Samuel slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady but his eyes shone with unshed tears of happiness. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel's kiss was tender and reverent, a public declaration of private devotion, as they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Byrne. Olivia felt a profound sense of rightness, of having found her true place in the world. The celebration at River's Edge continued well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing under a canopy of stars. As twilight deepened, Samuel led Olivia away from the festivities toward their new house, now completed enough to be their home. "I have something to show you," he said, a mysterious smile playing at his lips. Inside, lit by the warm glow of oil lamps, the house was more beautiful than Olivia had imagined. Polished wooden floors, plastered walls painted in soft colors, furniture that combined practicality with elegance. Samuel guided her through the rooms, pointing out special features he had incorporated with her in mind: a large corner window in the kitchen to make dishwashing less tedious, bookshelves built into the walls of the parlor, a small room off their bedroom that could serve as a nursery when the time comes. Finally, he led her to a room at the back of the house that she hadn't seen during previous visits. Opening the door with a flourish, he revealed a cozy study with a desk, more bookshelves, and a comfortable reading chair. "For you," Samuel explained. "For preparing lessons, grading papers, or simply having a quiet place to read and think. I want you to know that your teaching is important to me because it's important to you. Our marriage won't mean the end of your independence or your profession." Touched beyond words, Olivia wrapped her arms around her new husband. "You understand me so well. Thank you for everything." That night, as they retired to their new bedroom for the first time, all the uncertainty and hardship of the past year faded into insignificance. They had found in each other not just love, but true partnership, a sharing of dreams, values, and futures that transcended their unusual beginning. In the years that followed, River's Edge prospered under their joint stewardship. Samuel expanded his herd and reputation as one of the finest cattle ranchers in Missouri. Olivia continued teaching at Willow Creek School until the birth of their first child, a son they named James, after Samuel's grandfather. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, and eventually a second son, Daniel. Though Olivia no longer taught formally, she remained involved with the school, serving on the board and occasionally substituting when needed. Their home became known as a place of learning and culture, with books filling the shelves and meaningful conversations around the dinner table. 10 years after their wedding, on a warm May evening much like their wedding day, Samuel and Olivia sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over their land. "You ever think about that day in Columbia?" Samuel asked quietly. "The auction?" Olivia considered the question. "Less and less as time passes. It seems almost like a story that happened to someone else now." She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of a decade's love. "But I'll never forget that it brought us together." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "I rode into town that day with no intention of buying anything but supplies. When I heard what was happening, something just compelled me to go see. And then I saw you, standing there with such dignity despite everything, and I knew I had to act." "You could have simply paid my debts without the spectacle of bidding," Olivia noted with a smile. "It would have been cheaper." Samuel chuckled. "True, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I had to make sure no one else claimed you." His expression turned more serious. "I never expected to fall in love with you, Olivia. I just wanted to right a wrong. And instead, you found a wife, a family, a fuller life." "The best kind of unexpected consequence," he agreed, leaning over to kiss her softly. From the yard came the sounds of children's laughter as James chased his siblings in a game of tag. The cattle lowed in the distant pastures, and somewhere a whippoorwill began its evening call. Olivia leaned her head against Samuel's shoulder, grateful beyond words for the chain of events, however difficult at the time, that had led her to this moment, this man, this life. She had been auctioned to the highest bidder, and that bidder had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose her own path. That she had chosen to walk that path with him was the happiest of all possible endings to what had begun as a tale of desperation. As twilight deepened into dusk, the Byrne family gathered on their porch, surrounded by the home and life they had built together, a testament to love's power to transform even the darkest circumstances into something beautiful and enduring.